Have you ever bought something as an impulse purchase? Maybe you've gone to the convenience store and saw a cheap DVD that looked like it was not the actual movie that you wanted to see. Maybe you went and bought a mango on sale that just got left in the refrigerator and went bad before you ever tried it because you don't even know if you like mangoes. Well, how about a washing machine as an impulse purchase? Probably never happened, right? Well, it happened with me. I was on Best Buy's website looking for something totally different, and up pops this Insignia full-sized washing machine, 4.1 cubic foot capacity for $277. And I thought, that's like $200 less than most other washing machines that are full-sized. What's the deal? So I promptly added it to my cart, and we are going to try it out to see what it's like. And what's interesting about this is it's an Insignia brand. It really doesn't mean anything. I think I know who made this washing machine, so I'm going to bring that in the studio in a little bit just to make sure. But let's see if $277 is too much to pay for this, or if it's a good deal for the price, or even a little bit more. So let's get through the testing and features of the machine. The reason this washing machine interested me was some of the features and specifications for $277. I got a full-size washing machine at 4.1 cubic feet, an agitator, and the options of the washing machine were pretty extensive, arguably nicer than other competitors of its price, even in the normally offered price range of $450. The dial allows you to select different modes. There's a delay start, soil levels, soak, and a deep water fill setting, which is really nice to have for this unit. The tub is rather large. It can handle 10 to 12 pounds of clothes easily, which is pretty nice. Like most washing machines that are modern, it does have a door lock that prevents you from opening it when you run it, but it does pause and allow the door to unlock during the wash, which was a nice feature, although it did require you to unpause the load. For the clothes, we used a similar load to what we've used in many other machines, which is about 11 pounds of clothes dry. The clothes in the basket fit really well. The manual will tell you not to fill it past 2/3 of the way, which would be about 12 to 14 pounds at maximum, depending on your mix of clothes. For the test load, we went with the default settings, other than adding the Water Plus. As a note, the unit doesn't give you a time estimate to start, but some modes do, like the Quick Wash, which is at 30 minutes. On screen, here's some shots of the machine in operation from our camera that watched over the whole cycle. It was about 6 minutes to fill, and once that was done, the rollover or agitation quality was mediocre. I'll be honest here, I'm not Kirk Rivas and have a ton of different videos on my channel showing rollover, but I would say that you can look by comparison to the WTW5057, and I would say it's a little bit weaker on the Insignia, but from everything I've read from other reviewers, it's enough to get the job done and your clothes clean, although if you had super soiled stuff, it may not be as good as you'd like. I would also note that the unit's pretty quiet. In our test, we found the following information. The agitate averaged about 51 decibels, with a peak at about 75 to 80. The water fill was around 60 decibels, and the spin was 69 decibels, which for the most part would be considered kind of quiet. For water usage during the entire load, it used 2.5 gallons of hot water in the warm setting, as well as 20.9 cold gallons between the primary operation, the rinse, and using that extra water mode. We ran multiple loads of clothes through the machine and found that if you just use the cold tap setting, it used about 15.3 gallons of water. On the electrical side of things, as noted on the tag of the unit, it uses a fair bit of electricity in a year's time. In the case of our unit, it ran just a little bit over 50 minutes, and it used 280 watts of electricity. And here's the distribution of how the washer ran using our Emporia energy meter for one of the loads of clothes. So far, we've ran between 5 and 6 cycles through this machine, and overall, I would say so far, quite good. I'm impressed with the UI and all the functions that this washing machine offers for such a low price. The agitation mode is probably good enough to get your clothes clean, but that's about it. The deep water cycle worked really, really well in terms of the smaller wash basket filling up quite a bit in order to mix the clothes properly. However, in order to get some of the inside shots of the video, we've had to take the machine apart a little bit already, and this is where the washing machine is going to start showing some of the problems that are involved with this style of Midea built machine. So let's start taking the machine apart to show you what I mean as to where this machine on sale is a good idea, but if you paid full price, you would be ridiculous. Let me show you why. One of the things we had to do when filming the unit was to understand the door locking mechanism to bypass it so we could film, as trying to shoot the observation of the rollover on top of the glass would not be very good. The lid does come off pretty easily on the unit if you had to service it. For anyone that cares, the Midea/Insignia system uses a door switch as well as a hidden magnet that triggers the control board to detect if the lid is open or not. They're both somewhat flimsy, or as Midea would call it, minimalistic, but at least it's an easy system to get to. The suspension rods on the unit are whisper quiet, and to its credit, I think these are well built. Just be safe when you reach in to pull the rods. You'll notice that these are identical, if not very similar, to LG, Samsung, GE, or Whirlpool systems. Once outside the tubs, they're very, very similar, and I think that of all the things in this washing machine, it's probably the one thing that is built super well on the machine not to go unbalanced easily without some sort of failure. But underneath the machine is where things get quite a bit questionable. At first glance, it's a pretty basic system with a belt-driven transmission that will look like a lot of its competitors. Servicing the unit from the bottom is not hard. It's serviceable almost identically to most other brands on the market. Everything's attached with what looks to be 10mm and 14mm screws, which also have a Phillips head option, which is nice. The shift actuator, though, is where I have some major questions. It's simply a cable and gear system that shifts between agitate and spin with the clutch. But more than that, the fact is that the actuator is just very flimsy and of a questionable build. But the bigger problem, though, is that I'm realizing now that nothing on the bottom of this machine is removable. There's no wire harness that the actuator, pump, or motor actually disconnect from. You cannot see it, at least on first view, and this begins a chain of huge problems I have with this machine from an engineering perspective. When you trace the wires underneath, it leads you to the rear accessibility of the machine. There's an access panel on the back side, which is kind of odd for a top-load washer, at least in my experience, but oh well, it's easy to get into. Worth mentioning is there's a drain pump clean out at the very bottom of the unit, which I thought was very nice to have. To be honest, I can't remember the last time I took one of these apart, but up to this point it tears down easily. The board is hidden behind the back with just 2 screws. At this point, my impression is that the wires from the pump, motor, and actuator were just wired into the main PCB, which is not great because it means there's a lot of extra work if it breaks down to get the board out to swap the items, because you have to do multiple things to replace a failing part. But in reality, the situation is much, much worse than just taking them off the board, as I note something off screen. Looking at the wires to the pump, nothing matches up color-wise to the board. There's no blue and black wire going from the pump to the PCB. Instead, everything goes through this oddball goodie bag in the corner of the machine that you can barely see. It takes a while to disassemble those small cable ties going to it. You could potentially access it from the bottom of the machine, but without knowing this, you wouldn't be able to pick it out. It's really piqued my curiosity. Once I get the bag opened, this is the stuff of nightmares. Every wire going in and out of the machine goes through this massive cluster, and this is where things are really bad on the machine. The collars don't even match from the items you would swap out. It's why I cannot trace anything if I had to ever fix this kind of machine, which is freaking ridiculous. Also, in the process of showing this off on the camera, the wire gauges are mismatched going in and out of the harnesses. It reeks of them trying to save $1 here and there, and although some companies do undersize their wires, they do it throughout the entire machine, so this is an intentionally bad decision to make it cheaper. The system is not only bad for the DIYer, but it's also bad for a technician, because if you have to work on it without proper color coding, you could not diagnose the system like a professional. And speaking of professionals, when you download the secret operations manual, it doesn't tell you that there are any collars on the system. You just merely have to guess. This is poor work from the factory and whoever wrote the manual. And again, it's just a poor design all around. But as we put this machine back together, my complaints about it are only starting. As you see, once this scene of me putting the board back together goes through, I was merely going to end the video here complaining about the door lock striker being flimsy when we had to look at it on camera, and then I was going to tell you whether or not you wanted to buy the machine at $277, or if it was just a bad idea at full price. But the issue that we ran into after this was that when we filmed the outro, a customer approached us right after filming that wanted to buy the washing machine, and we wanted to help them out, so we decided to give it one final test before we sold the unit to the customer, and that's where the bigger problems started to crop up. It began to fill, and well, that was it. The unit would not agitate or spin, and then it eventually drained. That was it. This led me to have to be a professional and immediately take the machine apart to fix and diagnose it, to see if maybe I just didn't put something back together the right way. I used the machine's hidden service mode, which I plan to film for a later video, and still there wasn't anything on the unit. I think the worst part of this machine right now is that there weren't any error codes to tell me what was wrong, to give me an idea of what maybe I had inadvertently messed up on, so I could just simply go in and solve it. For a while, I thought maybe it was the motor or actuator that maybe weren't reassembled tightly, but there was no signs of damage underneath, which led me back to the PCB. Maybe I just forgot to put a wire back in fully and it wasn't secured by accident. Things like that happen, and I wouldn't complain because it would have been my fault. But even after looking at the PCB, we did not find anything, so we went back to that messy wire bag we talked about earlier, and we found the culprit. A wire from the assembly had fully disconnected from the Molex harness, causing the entire system to fail. The motor wasn't getting voltage, but there was no way for us to tell this because, again, there was no error code, and we couldn't have tested this from the board since the wires were mismatched, showing additional failures and vulnerabilities of this particular design. Now, once we had the wire reattached with a much better connector, the machine was working again, fortunately for us and our future customer.
In the end, how do you conclude a video making notes and issues of concern on a machine and having them abjectly fail on you after just 5 loads and opening the machine up once to just see what's on the inside? That's really hard to do. I don't want to be too negative on a machine when it fails because sometimes you get lemons, but the fundamental issue of this machine is it's just poorly designed. The other side of this is that, let's say one of the components breaks on you outside of the warranty. One thing we haven't discussed is how easy it is to find parts for an Insignia washer or from the company that makes the machine, Midea. Well, the answer is if you go on a website for a very reputable company like, say, Encompass, who does carry a lot of Midea parts, this is what you find on their website for this specific model of washing machine, and you find that none of the parts are in stock. And not only that, the lookups to understand all the different parts in this machine are very poor. You have to take guesses on the names of the parts and what they are in order to find the right part number to match it up for, say, another website that could potentially have it in stock. This makes the machine very difficult to repair. Now, through a lot more research, I did find most of the parts for this machine if they did in fact break on me, but the cost to replace them on some of the parts, especially the drain pump, are outrageously expensive for such a cheap machine. And speaking of a cheap machine, would I recommend this? For $277, it will probably get you 2 to 3 years of life at best, which in that price range, I guess if you want to take a risk, you could. I personally would recommend for $300 a used washing machine from GE, Whirlpool, Amana, or LG. Chances are it's going to last as long as this is, but at least if it breaks, you know how to fix it, and the parts are plentiful. This much less precludes the fact that this machine is now $450 to $480 on Best Buy's website, which would be the worst idea possible. Without a doubt, this machine at full price, or a Midea, or a Criterion, or a Frigidaire, which they're now Midea units too, would be an abhorrent value if it shares the same parts, and many of them do. If you have $450 to spend on a machine, avoid this one at all costs. And I say that regardless if this machine broke down on me or not. There are machines such as the Amana TWM41WH8A that is a much better, well-built machine that has easier parts to find. Also, we have a LG WT6105CW that we're going to test soon that is almost the same price as this out the door at regular price, which is I think will end up being a much better machine, and make sure to watch out for that review in the near future. Overall, you can take a risk on this at $277 on sale, but that is at most what I would pay for it. This impulse purchase is kind of like the mango I got a few days ago on sale. It's probably rotten by now. And that's what I'm going to leave you with in the video. I hope you guys have a great day. I don't know what I'm going to do with this machine. I'll have to probably sell it at a loss because I just want, in good conscience, be able to sell this machine remotely close to full price. And it is definitely a throwaway machine. Way to go, Midea.